Alrighty. So as he's sharing his screen, if you want to access the presentation, it's in the chat. If more people join, then I will add the chat again. If you have any questions about PBL, project-based learning, or you want him to go more in depth, you can in the chat and we'll get to it. But until then, if you want to mute your mic, then it'll, as we're recording, there won't be as much lag.
All right, and because we've got a smaller group with us today, you can put stuff in the chat, or you can just tell Kate to stop, tell me to stop, and we will, kind of have more discussion based with it. So one of the things, thank you everybody for giving us such quick feedback the other night. It was super helpful because we want to be able to give you guys things that are going to help you through not only this process, but whenever everything goes back where we can be in schools and everything like that, whatever that date, will be. So one of the things that had a lot of people respond about was project-based learning. So we will add this to our YouTube channel that I shared out last night, as well as this presentation's in that folder. If you have tried to bookmark that or you have that email just saved, however, you have that, or you can take the link right from there. The goal of today is to kind of go over more of a broad scope of project-based learning, and then to give you resources as to where to start, what it can look like in a middle school classroom, places that you can go and get what project ideas are, rubrics, all of those different things. So as we just talked about, here, I think I don't have a dog, but if we had a dog, I would understand that this is why they chew on furniture. Kate and I send each other things. I forget, she sent me a really funny one last night. But if you haven't seen a lot of these on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, they're worth looking at to get us through the days. So if you have not read the book, the PBL Playbook, or heard of it, it's right here, and it's an easy and awesome read. So I love this quote that he uses in there. Mastery is the goal, learning is the habit. And I like that because it keeps me in perspective of what we're looking at, especially whenever we're talking about project-based learning. In this book that is linked in there, it takes you to this website. And his website is, for this, is pretty awesome. Even if you haven't read the book, there's a ton of different resources. And in there, there's a study guide, but it has a video with each chapter, and it also has resources for research, for articles, a lot of different things, and it's an easy read. Like it's a legit read that you can do very quickly. And AJ Giuliani, you'll have another link to his blog here shortly. I really enjoy his style of writing. He did Empower and he did Launch and a couple of other things. But he's a former educator. He's entertaining. He's got good pace with everything. But I like this quote because it keeps in perspective of what we're looking at, especially with PBL. And then another thing that he says in one of his blogs, if you get 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. And in the one blog it gives, if you do nothing to get better, you try to do something better, this is the way it's going to look. And I think that is important perspective for at least myself to keep thinking about, as we try to get our kids always better, but what ways can we get better? And now that we have some more time, as even with juggling everything at home, this is something we get to keep in perspective. So a lot of times when we talk about and look at project-based learning, we hear and we see examples of projects. For the sake of being too text-heavy, I'd like to look at a couple of different differences between projects and project-based learning, because we can look similar, but these are some of the key things that could be different. For instance, for one, for the teacher, the project, the work occurs mainly before the project starts, whereas in projects it's after it's complete. You're looking at, but you're worried much more about the end product as opposed to the process in projects. In project-based learning, the students have a lot of different choices. whereas in projects, they don't have many opportunities to make choice. Maybe you have a couple of, like maybe 3 different things in a project, but in true project-based learning, you're giving parameters for what they need to accomplish and what competencies they need to have, what skills, standards, etc. And then they get to kind of drive based upon what is important to them. And project-based learning has driving questions, and it's really open. So that's hard for a lot of us. And that when I was in 6th grade classroom teacher, that was a hard thing at first, because how do you try to manage a lot of those different things? And that's where we'll get into some planning guides, and we'll look at some checklist items that you can consider before you ever roll something out, because that can be the overwhelming part. But with some of these things, I think it would really be helpful. And the really, really big thing that I find in project-based learning is it's relevant to their lives, or their future lives, and it closely resembles work done in the real world. And I think that's really important, as we look to continue to get our kids future ready, career ready, whatever words and catchy phrases you want to think of. We want it, especially at the middle school level, it needs to be relevant to them, it needs to be approximate to them, or else they'll do what they need to do to get the trained grade that they have been conditioned to want. But their motivation isn't as high. And I think that's where project-based learning can be something that's really, really useful, whether it's in the classroom or, if this is something, as Donna said in an earlier meeting, when we originally started planning, we planned for 2 weeks, and now we probably, we're going to need to plan for a longer time frame, and we don't know what that time frame is going to be right now. So this is something that you could look to build, and this can be something for your team or your content area, whatever that be. That's a longer term product that they would be looking at. You can have check-in points and different things like that, because it's important to resemble what's important to them. So we're not going to watch this video. It's like a 4.5-minute video by a guy named John Spencer, who also co-writes with AJ Giuliani and a lot of different things. But it's a really quick and catchy video that talks about project-based learning. And in there, it talks about his process and why he became an educator, and a lot of those different things. And it gives into why project-based learning is super important, especially for those kiddos that aren't going to be okay with, sitting and reading and do this and do that, and how we can really intrinsically motivate them. And in there, it also talks about, according to the Buck Institute for Education, which is a leader in project-based learning, there are 7 components to PBL. And, one of them being it's a challenging problem, a question. I think that's super important, as opposed to here's what you need to do and produce this. It gives parameters of those questions and what they'd be looking for. And then the students then take those questions to build what they want to do out of that. Sustained inquiry, and as we now have been gifted the blessing of time, there would be a lot of time if you wanted to attempt to do something like this with your own kids or your own team. Authenticity, student voice and choice, reflection, which is a huge part. And I know a lot of you do reflections with your kids, whether that's video-based, that's writing, reflecting on what they're learning, how things have changed in their process, and then critique, revision, and public product. So those are the 7 different things that would be truly what project-based learning is. This slide here then talks about the benefits of PBL. In academic achievement, we've heard everyone talk about 21st century competencies and the importance of that. So this absolutely does that. It brings in equity of learning, motivation, which is a huge thing, especially as we get into the spring of every year, especially as we look at trying to motivate our students at the 7th and 8th grade level, and how can that look different. And if they're motivated to want to do this, and it be important to them, proximate to them, then they're going to go above and beyond what they normally would do, and it brings in teacher satisfaction. This picture here is actually a link to AJ Giuliani's blog and site, and it has a bunch of different articles. It has training events. It has all of his books, a number of different things. But this is an actual article that gets into specifically what PBL looks like in the middle school classroom. And in here, while it looks daunting with length, it's only long because it gives firsthand examples as to what they did, what the process was, what was important. And I know that we shared a similar thing with the high school yesterday, but at the high school level. And a couple of folks reached out to me directly after and then today about how some of these gave them some ideas. So this is an easy read. This is something that's pretty good. He also has a podcast. If you're a podcaster, that you can either check the App Store, or a lot of these are tagged along with his articles. And he's entertaining. While Cult of Pedagogy is very good, I think her voice is less than entertaining. I think his voice is entertaining.
Cult of Pedagogy is the best. Everyone check it out.
So this is something that, and he also has, if it's not daily, it's almost every other day, email blasts that go out with a lot of really good ideas that aren't just PBL, that bring in a number of different practices and tools and resources. So I really would suggest going here and subscribing. And if you're a podcaster, I definitely would suggest looking at some of that. You doing all right, Kate? Yes, no?
Yes, sorry. I didn't realize I put my mic back on. Yes. And I will, Lindsay, I'll link that page in the chat real quick.
The one we went to, so that's also linked to here. Oh, sorry, you go ahead. So as we look at PBL and the importance of it, and I think most of us, if not all of us, if you're here, that's, you understand that. It brings in a lot of those different things, but then you have to look at the Rubik's Cube of like, how do you start this? What do I look for? I've tried this before and it didn't go really well, any of those different things. So one thing this is clickable here. It's a PBL checklist planning sheet that gives you some things to think about, and it's simple, and that's why we liked it. There's a lot of different things. If you tried to go online and find resources, you could find a lot of them, and it'd be really helpful. But it is like finding you could get lost for days in PBL articles and stuff like that. So this one is simple. It gets into what skills do you want, cognitive, soft skills, your ISTE standards, stuff like that. What does the product look like? What are the learning targets and, student choices that you're going to want to consider? What does a collaboration look like? All of those different things. This is definitely where I would start, where we would start, because this is concrete, it's quick, it gives you some talking points and thinking points. The next slide then gets into, and if you click on that, it's going to bring you to a copy of a project planner. And something that we're going to show you here soon is PBL Works. And if you've looked at PBL Works before, it'll be a review for you. If you have no earthly idea what that is, it is a wealth of resources in the area of project-based learning. And this is something that goes from there. And it's a project planner that gives you an overview that's broken up. So, whatever your driving question is, the project summary, what kind of public overview do you want to have? And then what are your learning goals? And I like this process because it doesn't talk about anything product based. It talks about what's the learning going to be. And this is where you can interweave different skills. So if you are sitting here and you're like, I think our team could do this for a 2-week period. And I know one of the teams did something like this early on with the COVID and everything like that. But you can look at the different skills you could be hitting. And then this is the big thing, and this is what was the hardest for me, is the project milestones, because you could have groups or students in a bunch of different places. But this keeps you and whomever, kind of looking at, I want them done with this part by here, this part by here. And I'm going to be able to do check-ins, whether that be personally, that be through reflections on their part, turn-ins, all of those different things. Because I know some people in the past that I've worked with throughout the district have said, well, it's just a bunch of work until we get to the end. But those project milestones are super important because that's where that back and forth collaboration with the student is so important. And that's where that feedback is really big and all of that stuff. So this project milestones one is huge for me because that gives me that perspective as a teacher as to what to be looking for and when. And then a project calendar that you can use for yourself or you can send out to the kids. And this is what they are looking for on this day, especially for those kiddos that struggle with the ambiguous project that goes over 3 weeks. And I'm a procrastinator by life. So for me, these are things that I need or would need, especially as a kid, I would definitely need this so that I can say, okay, by this day, I need this day, or else I would wait until 15 minutes beforehand and put it together. And then the bottom part gives you some lesson planning resource ideas. So whether, this is something you want to implement now, which is absolutely attainable. There's a lot of different articles out there that talk about how this is the time to do PBL and bring something that's important to them to your students, or this is something you want to do, long term. There's some good lesson plan resources. And then the next slide, because then you talk about, okay, how do I assess this? What does that look like? And rubrics are the easiest way for me to put this together. And PBL Works, which is an example where we took this from, gives a number of different rubrics that you could take and make into your own. In classroom, you can build rubrics out of that. And you could take a couple of different ones from resources that we're going to look at here briefly and make that your own. This one is on creativity and innovation. So, it's focusing on, identifying source information, select ideas. It gets into, originality, value, style, a lot of those things that we think of anyways. They also have ones for presentation and all that stuff and what that would look like. So those are all clickable links in the slideshow. And then one of the biggest things that I know Kate and I have talked about in difficulty with PBL is, what are some ideas? And these are just project name ideas that can go into content-based standards. But some of them can be applicable, some of them aren't. But those are just different ideas to get you started. In a moment here, we're going to get into the PBL Works site that you can see. It's a free resource that you can make an account for, and you can get a number of different ideas. Are we doing all right, Kate, with anything?
Yeah.
Okay, anything I missed?
No questions yet.
Okay, cool. So the last slide here, if you click on this, it's going to take you to this site. And if you haven't ever been on here, it's going to invite you to make an account, and it's super easy, it takes seconds. And in there, it has a lot of different resources. So the first big one for me looking at this is it gives you projects, and it can go down to the subject area, the grade level. It can get into standards. It can get into topics, a lot of different things. So if I was going to pick one for ELA and the 6th through 8th grade band. So when I go there, I'll look at history and pictures. A lot of these are really good. But what is very good about this, it gives you a project description, things to consider, context, all of those different things. And then it gives you downloadable project files. And some of them have a lot, some of them don't have as much. But here would be the project overview idea. And these are things that you could use the majority, if not all of this, or you could take it and be like, okay, this gives me an idea for this that goes along with this text we're reading, or this, area we're about to get into in history, or whatever we're doing, all of those different things. And it gives you that with standards. It brings in a lot of these different things. And then in here it'll also give, resources that you could use with the kids, with your own creation and everything like that. It also gives us, through resources, a ton of different things. It gives us some articles. It gives us, down in the planning tools, some that are for you and some that are for you to give to the kids, and what that would look like is, central project design elements list. And in here, this is a little bit more, but I even like, this was all created by teachers. So everything in here, for the most part, if not every single part, is very like teacher friendly, teacher worded friendly. So I even like the thumbs up, thumbs down, things that you could package right into what you're doing or what you wanted to do. So PBL Works is something that we would highly suggest. I know myself, I just got lost in different things, and I haven't been in the classroom in 2 years. Give strategy guides, student handouts. The list goes pretty long. So as we look at, the goal was to give you an overview, but then also give you resources that you could walk away with and be dangerous enough to start planning and considering. So we would definitely start with, this checklist, because it's quick, it's short, it's concrete, and it gives you some different overview. And then in there, while you're looking at what your outcomes would be, your learning targets, those different things, you can look at some of these different examples of projects to see what others have done. Because I know, like, again, Kate and I talk about this all the time. Like, what does a good one look like? What makes it a project-based learning as opposed to just a project? And having some of this concrete comic book algebra is one I never thought of. Gives us some concrete examples of what it could be. So that's, you don't want to go longer than a half an hour. Any questions that we have? Any questions, Kate, that you're getting, or that you'd like, anything you want to add?
No. We have about, what, five minutes left, if anyone has any quick questions.
I would just like to say thank you, because you guys are amazing. And I'm sitting here like, wow, these are our people presenting this. You could get this somewhere, but you guys put this together for our school, and I'm just super impressed and grateful. The other piece that I like about it is when you were talking about those deadlines, where you're chunking and coming up with some sort of a formative assessment. I think that answers the question that people have said to me in the past is like, yeah, but what about grades? Well, there you go. Have that tie into how you can respond to that question. Thanks so much.
Andy, there's a ton of them on the site that you just showed. Is there like one in particular that you think is a great example that we should be kind of looking to?
Find it. You mean for the project ideas? Yeah. Give me 1 second here. The one that we saw at the beginning, pull it up here. I'm clicking too much. The literary playlist I really like, and that's under ELA in there. So back to sharing, because like this brings in music with them, and in here, playlists that portray the development of themes and characters over the course of a story, and so this can actually be adapted to 6 through 12. But I really like the literary playlist, and that's one that gets used a lot of places. I had seen that before, and then when I got in here, I've seen that in action. If I can find the video, I'll send it to you, Katrina, because it was done. In that case, it was done in inner city school, and it was pretty powerful to see. That one's a really, really good one. I really liked the comic book hero one for math. It wasn't something that I'd thought of doing before, but if I was teaching 6th grade again, I would do that one for sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, have a good day. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us or text us. We definitely put our number out there and started floating it around because I have like 1,000 emails, and I know Andy does too. So sometimes it's hard to miss like little tiny. It's easy to miss the little tiny questions. So feel free to text us. It's really like some people say, "Oh, I don't want to bother you." You're not bothering us. Sometimes you're more likely to get an answer quicker.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Great, Andy. Drew?
Hold on 1 second.